Yeah, that's basically it. You know, I don't like Pārdaugava. You know, it's too far. You know, you need to cross that bridge. Which is stupid. It's who actually lives there? Hipsters. There's nothing to see there anyway. Stick to the old town. And sadly, this is not what I would like to talk about, but sadly, these are most of the answers I receive from people when I ask them what are their opinions on Pārdaugava, what they think about this part of a city, and how they see it. And for me, it's quite devastating if you take 40% of Riga, that has probably one of the biggest offers of heritage from historical, industrial, architectonic, social, etc., perspectives. It's somehow being bullied. It's been harassed, and it's been, in a way, kind of shown in a very bad light from a tourism perspective. And yeah, my name is Mārtiņš, and at some point I am a tourism developer, tourism critic, urban explorer, and I'm going to talk about Pārdaugava tourism and space bullying. And I deliberately chose the word space because, well, the level of harassment and abusement is the level of Star Wars. If we talk about Pārdaugava, it's terrible. But anyway, my story begins in 2007 when I actually moved to Riga to live up there in the middle of nowhere. Can you see that little red dot? Right, for 1.5 years I study and I live in Pārdaugava, which is the furthest district on the right coast, on the right side of the river. And actually it gives me already some interesting perspectives of what could be done and what is not going on, because, like I said, it's middle of nowhere, and back then, 10 years ago, the Pārdaugava fortress, that is a very interesting destination today, is somehow invisible. And also the area is somehow not the place you go if you want to enjoy a little bit of the sea. You go on the other side, or you go further. So somehow that place faces some abusement at that moment when I lived there. Then in 2009, I start to look at the perspective of Pārdaugava from a more professional perspective of tourism. And I start with my friends doing tours in Āgenskons and in Ķīpsala. And it gives me a very interesting look on how much there is to see, how much there is to experience, but how much a lot of people are not really talking about, and how much tourism policies are actually robbing from Pārdaugava by not pointing it out. And in 2014, I almost moved to this building, but it never happened, but I just like the building. I wanted to show you that. I almost moved there. But in 2009, the next level of me being interested in tourism related to Pārdaugava started. And the next level is called Āgenskons Free Tour. And basically that was a tour that we began two seasons ago in 2016, and we wanted to tell different stories about the city, more local, more perspective of authenticity, showing you all of those contrasts that Āgenskons can give, which is history and the future, which is past and the present, which is poor and rich. But there was, of course, some other, from touristic perspective, some other issues we wanted to sort out. And one of the issues was that Āgenskons was a non-relevant place. It somehow didn't exist on a map of tourism. It somehow had a lot to offer, but it was ignored by landscapes of wealth and power, as quoted in one article I used to read a long time ago. And to realize that problem, I launched a theory called landmark rows. And it's very easy created. If you take a brochure of top 20 objects of the city and you put them on a map, and like with windroses, you draw the space that is the maximum coverage of you can have if you imagine, if you really want to walk from all of the objects to all of the objects. And basically in 1-2 days you see all of this territory. And this is Riga. This is tourism relevant from the perspective of marketing of the city. It's 2%. And the only thing across the river is County Quarter, which is a hipster's market, right? But anyway, that is the only thing they can visit. On winter, it's not very frequent. And if you go there in summer, it's three times a week, but still, it's not really much of what could be. And another thing is, you can see this little dot in Uppsala, that's Janis Lipke Memorial. But how to reach that place, infrastructure is unbearable. So basically, Pārdaugava does not exist. And I wanted to try this landmark rows on different other cities. So I did gather top 10, top 7, top 15, top whatever places in many different cities around the world, and this was the best. This is Paris, and it only had top 10, but it already had 35% covered. And of course, it's very hard to walk Paris, but imagine if you really wanted to take all of the places, this is how much you would see, how much you would experience, and then you could go back home saying, you know, I actually saw Paris. 35% against 2%, I think it's pretty, it's a disaster. And at that moment, I actually started to develop two other things that might be developed before, but one of them was called tourism non-place. One thing, touristic non-place is somehow related to Marc Auger's anthropologist's definition of a non-place as such, which is a place of passage, a place that has no value. It exists, but it doesn't exist in our mind as a place of value. And from movement, it's a highway, it's airport, it's a hotel. It's something between your life and your entertainment, home, work, wife, mistress, or whatever. Yeah. But anyway, in touristic perspective, it's the opposite. And by starting to think about this sort of a thing more and more, I realized it is actually the opposite, because non-place, touristic non-place, is a place that has a lot to offer, has everything to offer. But in our minds, in our perspective, in our stereotypes, in our prejudice, it doesn't exist. So somehow we try to erase many parts of the city, and of course, if we do that, we're not recommending them to tourists. So also tourists don't see it. So the place doesn't exist at all. And another interesting perspective was district regionalism, which was mostly, well, it's not really a term yet, but it was a little bit used in the States by talking about economical development of one town. But in tourism, district regionalism is something that kind of pushes people to see different places. It's like regionalism in a country scale, when every single region of the country has its own potential, it can develop itself, it can offer itself, and we cannot bully that region by saying, this is not that cool, like stick to this cool. And every single region, in this case in the city, every single neighborhood has its own potential. And we are living in a negative district regionalism. We only have Old Town, and we only have the center, and everything else is whatever. And it shouldn't be like that. At first, because a lot of people come to the city, and they only stick to those landscapes, wealth and power, but there's a lot to offer that they don't see, and they never come back. Because, well, there's nothing to see. But talking about students, also involving that sort of perspective, we had an experience through this Agenskons free tour by asking students that visited our tour to see Agenskons where they live. And mostly they were Germans. German students were the majority. And when we asked them, where do you stay? They said, oh, we live on that side, you know, somewhere there. And we were like, why? Well, because, well, it looks beautiful, things happen, and there's no place to stay in Agenskons. And that was true. And it's not only the problem with German students that they want to live in a place that looks good. They can take a selfie and send it back home saying, you know, Mom, I'm living in this Art Nouveau building. I'm cool. You know, I'm not poor. But anyway, it also feels you better because you can just walk down 5 stories and you can have a cafe, you can have a restaurant, you can have street life. Once it becomes a standard, it becomes a thing to achieve. But on the other side, In Ārgenskons, it's the opposite. For example, this is what causes big problems. Why not that many people, both tourists, both students and locals, do not live just in the center of Pārdaugava, which is Ārgenskons. This is a week ago. This is Airbnb offer you can have if you want to visit Latvia, which is more than 70 apartments. As you can see, the price varies from 15 to 180 euros. So the level of apartments are also different. So for different ages, for different pockets, for different perspectives. But these 70 apartments are not available to anyone. Anyone that wants to live for a longer period than just a couple of days. And this is just with Airbnb. Don't get me wrong, I like that sort of perspective. Airbnb is a cool thing, but when it comes in and makes a massive gentrification of the area, pushing out the ones that really would like to stay in the area and actually maybe give some value to it, I see a problem with it. And there's another very interesting thing, which was mentioned several times, which is the massive Daugavgrīvas Street highway that connects the north of Pārdaugava to the center, and then it goes across the bridge, and it goes by Old Town, and everybody's taking photos, you know, of a beautiful monument, and suddenly there's a truck. Oh, sorry, I need to take another one. And this is just one piece of that street, and there are dozens of beautiful wooden buildings in a way I'd like to live in. This one is, by the way, on sale. You can buy one. Would you? I would, but I couldn't, because I couldn't, you know, kind of go over this barrier of trucks every single minute passing by. And these are not just like several buildings, not dozens of buildings. These are hundreds of apartments that are somehow also bullied because of the city not willing to sort out the problem for more than 40 years of taking the north connection to go on the other side. And they just go past Old Town. And then you have Daugavgrīva Fortress, which is an amazing place to go and enjoy beautiful scenery and a beautiful 400-plus year history of all of the armies being here. And then you have Spilves Lidosta, the airport, that is a beautiful example of Soviet realism. It's decorated, it's renovated, but now it's locked for public because the managers cannot cope with managing. And then there's this beautiful Zeguškalns Park, which is the highest peak of the city, but it's nothing really big. Nothing's going on there. There's a beautiful place for you to have events and culture gathering. You can make high lines from the top of the hill, go 100 meters and 100, not 100, but 50 kilometers per hour. Whoa, what a beautiful touristic attraction. But there's no place for that because not a single part of the city, not a single entrepreneur is interested in developing something in Zeguškalns. And then there's a never-ending bridge that Viesturs call the trampoline. But anyway, it's a pretty good place to go and take selfies. Right? And then there's Zunda Garden that is right next to Risaba, just like these buildings I pointed out, 5 minutes from the Risaba University. So you, as a student, could live there. You could come to the university and go back and have a beautiful workers' district house, but it's impossible. And this one also is kind of now in a 50-50 situation because the owner's planning to move this away and rebuild into a massive, another living space. And then there's a beautiful tower you can have that was on sale a while ago, 150,000 euros, and it couldn't get a buyer, so artists decided, maybe let's just get together, let's buy this. And it didn't happen. But anyway, then you have Z Towers, which are, by the way, a beautiful contrast. You have the future next to the past. But nothing actually happens because there's not a single bike path to unite all of these things. Not a single bike road along that massive Daugavgrīvas street, and there is a path next to you can take by going, but so that doesn't even need, you don't need to spare the space, you just walk. And then you can just lay asphalt and bicycles can go up and down, and imagine how much energy can be distributed, and this is how you can maintain that regionalism. And eventually the last thing is this sort of a kind of a joke, kind of a sort of a definition of a joke that I call Sakura effect. And I believe wherever you plant Sakuras, then the urban infrastructure will develop. And this is actually, this spring, this is, you know Sakura, Japanese cherry, right? So this is a Victory Park. And this spring, it really showed that the place is very popular, and lots of people went there, lots of people rode there, lots of people went there with families and children, and they were taking selfies and pictures and everything. So that place was really vibrant. They were local, they were tourists, they were students, everybody. And then, of course, it disappeared, but a lot of people went there, and they would imagine if a lot of people went there, more than necessary, and they would imagine that asphalt is bad, that there's no bike path, there's no place for you to sit, because, well, we're still in a post-Soviet perspective that if you sit, you don't work. So don't sit. I don't know. It's just you know what I see. But imagine how fast the city would develop if you would make tourists unhappy. Because if they are unhappy, they make bad picture. They say bad things. And you know, locals, they always say bad things. But what about tourists? You know, they're complaining about infrastructure. I couldn't sit there down. I couldn't enjoy myself. I couldn't take a perfect selfie. And that's why I really think about tourism as a beautiful movement of places being developed. And that's why these are these two things we kind of need to sort out from a tourism perspective. And thing number one is that ourselves, we need to erase lots of non-touristic non-places in the city by willing to go there. Okay, let's just try this weekend, Pārdaugava Fortress. Why not? I've never been there. Why haven't you been there? Oh, I've no idea. My mom said it's dangerous. I'm going to get nicked. You know, it's a suicide mission. Oh no, come on. That was like 25 years ago. Actually, never really was like that. I was robbed in Pārdaugava, but I'm still here. So it's a pretty cool thing. But anyway, the first thing we need to change our own perspective, that not only tourists are the ones that fly in or ride in, but we all are tourists. We can go to some neighborhoods we've never been in our life in Riga, within the city we live, and eventually still we're gonna get a real deal, an authenticity. So what's the difference between them and us? And of course, this district regionalism is also an important thing to make the city, every neighborhood as possible, at least 10, 15 neighborhoods, important for tourism. Because eventually then we have the increase of tourists coming in, and then they could be distributed. Then if you see one part, and then someone says, you know, on that side of the river, there is this beautiful this Victory Park, right? It's a beautiful sakura trees, but I have a plane to catch. Maybe next time. And they come next time, because in Riga we don't have this sort of a system of asking people or giving them an opportunity to come back. They also come back because of the connection, or they never come back at all. So by giving them possibilities to visit neighborhoods, maybe they would return. And imagine how much opportunities you can have when you have all of these bike lanes everywhere. And all of those 30,000 students we're talking about, they would go everywhere. They would see things, and they would make Riga as a different picture. So, hi forever from Pārdaugava. Thank you.